Hey there, it's John from Living the Music. Today we're talking about a book. So yeah, I love music. Music is life. It's the spice of life. I get so much from it, and I enjoy talking about it. But every once in a while, I want to talk about a book that I've read. As you can see, I enjoy books as well. Those are a lot of my nonfiction books, but I enjoy a good literary book as well. And one of my favorites has been Margaret Atwood. So she has this memoir which came out in 2025, and I thought I would share with you my reflections on this. The one and only other book that I've shared on this channel is when I finished this Jordan Peterson book, We Who Wrestle with God, Perceptions of the Divine. And this is kind of like his take on the stories of the Old Testament, or at least many of the stories of the Old Testament. Woo, this was quite a grind getting through. This one here by Margaret is also, as you can see, quite a tome. It's about 570 pages, if you don't count the index and stuff. And I've just recently finished it. So here's my reflections. Of course, she's a fantastic writer, so pretty much she's going to do a good job with her own memoir. Now, she does say this is called Book of Lives, a memoir of sorts. So maybe memoirs in their essence would be more, have more analyzation in them, more sort of trying to put things in context and sort of muse about the meanings of this or that or the other thing about life. This one is more of a chronicle where she's like going through the events of her life one after the other. It doesn't have that much contextualization or analyzation of what she's feeling. So for example, like there's a little passage in here where she talks about what it's like to be famous. You could imagine in a memoir that might go on many pages, but here it's maybe, I don't know, a couple pages, page and a half, something like that. Still interesting what she says, but it's just she doesn't belabor all of that. So you get the chronicle basically from pre-birth, talking about her parents and grandparents to some extent, up to her birth, up through her whole childhood, and then finally her academic life, and then into her literary career. By the last, I don't know, third or so, she's sort of going back and forth between talking about her adventures with her husband and the various novels that she wrote. So her most famous novel is The Handmaid's Tale, which came out in 1985. I love that book. That's one of my favorite novels of all time. She eventually wrote a sequel to that, The Testament, which is also really good. Love that so much. I also enjoyed this Penelopiad book by her. This is her sort of retelling of the Odyssey with, her take on it, her retelling here, with meaning like, sort of she can play with it in her own way. So very interesting. And then I've also read another one called Alias Grace, which is really powerful. That was turned into a mini-series, sort of 6-part TV, I think on Netflix, by Sarah Polley, which is also very gripping, by the way. But the book itself is fantastic. I love that one. I believe I've also read Robber's Bride and The Blind Assassin. I say I believe because I don't always keep all my books, and you sort of, I don't know about you, but I don't necessarily remember everything I've read, and I certainly can't remember the plots. I also have these yet to be read. Surfacing is one of her early books. Cat's Eye came out just after Handmaid's Tale, so one of these days with those. But back to this memoir, she is incredible with her memory. I don't have near the memory that she does. I suppose that's to be expected with a novelist of her caliber, and being so good at discernment of her characters and what they're thinking and feeling. I mean, she really pays attention, and her mind is very agile. So congratulations, to her on that. I remember reading Bob Dylan's Chronicles book, where he goes through a few different periods of his life in some detail, and I was amazed by his memory also, like just mind-blowing how he could remember all these details. Now, I think she had some help from her sister and also her daughter, for as far as the latter part of her life. But still, I give her a lot of credit for being able to make this as detailed as she made it. Sometimes when you're reading memoirs, whether they're rock bios or whatever, you may or may not be so interested in the childhood piece of it. You might be impatient to get to the part of where they're doing the work that you're familiar with, in her case, Handmaid's Tale and stuff like that. But in this case, because she is such a good writer, and I knew it was going to be that kind of book, I just kind of like surrendered to the process, so to speak, and I enjoyed her retelling of her childhood. It's a lot of detail. She tells this kind of long version of what a formative event in her life, or series of events, where she was bullied when she was around 9 years old, and there was these sort of three girls, I think, one ringleader, and they very mischievously bullied her. They sort of made her their project, and they were very critical of her and teasing and sort of playing tricks on her and stuff, but all in the guise of that we're helping you. So it was one of those things that she says really shaped her personality. She went from being this trusting, open little girl to being more of a guarded, careful person. And I think it also gave her a window into the maliciousness that can abound in this world with various people, and perhaps within ourselves as well. So that was especially interesting, and I'm really happy that she was willing to reveal that in some detail. As far as the insight into her process of writing, I think she does a good job there. She talks, at least in some detail, for every novel about what was the genesis of the idea and what kind of challenges she had in putting them together. Of course, The Handmaid's Tale was really something I was looking forward to getting to, and she didn't disappoint on that. She does put a good amount of space into that, and illuminating the backstory of that incredible classic. And by the way, I was saying to my partner as I was reading this, it's really something to be said for Margaret Atwood, that from the latter half of the 20th century, she's got to be one of the only people that I know of that has written what I think will be and is a classic novel. Along the lines of a Dickens and Faulkner and that kind of thing, and Hemingway and so forth. Some people would point to Kill a Mockingbird and Beloved by Toni Morrison, but you got to put Handmaid's Tale, I think, in there as well, and especially with the miniseries on Netflix, and now it's the miniseries of the sequel as well. That's going to live forever too, or hell of a long time. So yeah, it's just kind of gone into the zeitgeist in an incredible way, and it's one of those literary novels. It combines incredible characters, incredible descriptions and observations, but also a social commentary on what could happen in life, in public, and in government where you could find yourself in a theocracy all of a sudden. And of course, there are places in the world that are experiencing that unfortunate reality, and the idea that that could possibly happen in America is really distressing. And it's so, because of just the genius of that work, it's going to be a classic and an enduring one. Let's see what else. She's an adventurer of the mind and an adventurer of the world. So it's really kind of fun. She goes through a lot of adventures that she takes with her husband. They love really immersing themselves in nature in various parts of the world. They also very into art and culture and history and all of that. But they're especially avid bird watchers. Like they're really heavy into that, and I'm impressed by how she combines that life of the mind with really living a full life, and I think she did in terms of her travels, many friends, and her deep relationship with her husband. She seems to be a very devoted mother. There's not much to critique Margaret Atwood for that I can tell. She does go through, near the end of the book, this whole scandal with this guy in Canada who there's this whole legal case against him for abusing a woman in various forms, which may or may not have as much evidence as you would like in that case. And she talks about how it became somewhat of a cult, and like you couldn't diverge in opinion. You had to say the right thing, or you'd be outcasted from the inner circle, and so I'm proud of her that she kind of stuck to her integrity about that, and basically said let's let the legal process take its course, and we'll find out the results. And as she says at the end of that story, let's, whatever the truth is, let it come out and let the chips fall where they may. And I couldn't agree more with her about that. Well, what else? So by the end of this book, she's 86 years old. She's still writing. She's got that writing fever that came to her when she was 16, and it has never left her, and it's always served her one way or the other, whether in poetry or in novels or various essays and so forth. So again, she's lived a full life. She gives it to us here in great detail. You find out behind the scenes of her writing and her process. So I enjoyed it. It was a long process to finish it, but I enjoyed reading certain passages to my sweetheart. And she's funny at various points too. She's very witty, as you would expect. And I remember this one part where she's just had finished The Handmaid's Tale, and one of her sort of newly engaged friends was the first one to read it all the way through. And Margaret says to her, "What do you think? I think I could be in a lot of trouble with this one." And her friend replies, "I think you're going to make a lot of money." Well, perhaps both came true, but she certainly must have done very well with that book and continues to do. So bless her on that. I'm happy for her. I'm grateful for her to write this, And if she comes out with another interesting novel, I'll be all over that too. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on Margaret. By the way, there's her pretty much 86-year-old self. There's her younger self with her one of her first novels, Surfacing. And so that's her, I think, in her 30s. And that's the young Margaret. So there's wonderful pictures throughout this, by the way. Not only do you get the color photos, in various parts, chronicling different periods of her life, but even during a chapter, she'll throw in a photo if it's relevant to what she's talking about. Of course, I'm going through many pages here and not finding any photos, but trust me, they are interspersed throughout the book. Here's one. There's a brooding Margaret, young Margaret. So, yeah, very well done book. If you're a fan of Margaret Atwood, I think you would enjoy it. If you're not a fan, are you really going to read this? I don't know. But I would point you toward her novels, in particular Handmaid's Tale, The Testament, and Alias Grace are my favorites. And this one, the Penelopiad, could be interesting too, especially in light of the Odyssey movie by Christopher Nolan, which is sort of hot right now. You might enjoy Margaret's take on the story. There you go, everybody. Thanks for watching, and please give us a like on this video. And I would love any comments you have. Please share those down below. Let me get the thumbnail here. All right. Please subscribe to my channel, and we'll see you next time.